When the clock of animal evolution began to turn, life on Earth seemed simple, sedentary, and peaceful. Then in a flash, everything changed. Over 500 million years ago, fantastic creatures sprang into being as though from nowhere. In geologic time, these animals appeared in the blink of an eye. For the evolution of life on our world, it was a singular, defining moment. Des Collins has dedicated his career to the pursuit of these ancient creatures. As a paleontologist, he wants to look back in time. All the way back to more than 500 million years ago. By peering into the darkest recesses of animal history, Collins hopes to shed light on what has long remained a mystery. At Toronto's Royal Ontario Museum, Collins works with a vast repository of fragments from the ancient past. Fragments that reveal a world unknown until recently.
We have a much better one over here. There's the claw, the large predator. Oh, yeah. It shows up much better. Yeah,
These fossils from high in the Canadian Rockies form pieces in a puzzle that tell the story of early life on Earth.
Yeah, that looks great. Thank you. Okay, good. Good. The locality I work with is what's called the Burgess Shale. It's a very famous locality, known since it was first discovered about 1909. The numbers of fossils are in the tens of thousands. The first person that collected the famous locality out west in Western Canada around the turn of the century, he collected something like 65,000 specimens in 5 seasons.
Strange, almost unearthly creatures were discovered in the Burgess Shale. They existed over 500 million years ago during the Cambrian period, 8 times earlier than the last days of the dinosaurs. But more astonishing than their antiquity was the way these bizarre animals appeared, as if all at once, suddenly coursing through the world's oceans. Evidence of this unique event is not isolated to the Canadian Rockies. Similar sites have been uncovered all over the world. This extraordinary burst of animal life was dubbed the Cambrian Explosion. If we could go back in time, before fish, before complex animals roamed the seas, and before the Cambrian Explosion, we would find only simple creatures. The course of life was relatively slow. Sponges, flower-like organisms, and flatworm-like animals dominated the ocean realm. Then, evolution took an abrupt turn. Suddenly, wondrous new life forms filled the watery world. A marine worm called Achaea was remarkably complex and mobile. Survival depended on competition for food, and the ocean became a realm of hunter and hunted. The Cambrian was a time full of sudden danger. Even in such a savage world, Anomalocaris stood out. Nothing matched it for its sheer size and killing efficiency. Snaring its prey with its two powerful front claws, it was a swift and deadly hunter. Only slightly lower on the food chain, another fearsome predator prowled the oceans. Opabinia had 5 eyes at the top of its head, and its own grasping claws to snare the weak and unsuspecting. To counter such ferocious predators, animals adapted new defenses. Canadia, a worm-like creature, sported protective bristles along the length of its body, essential armor for a slow-moving beast. Wiwaxia also glided on the ocean floor, depending on their elongated spikes for protection. What caused this phenomenal eruption of life, and what impact did these fantastic creatures have on Earth?
Some of these are magnified times 12, like this Waptia.
Boy, that's fantastic. Look at the translucence of it and all the detail of its appendages. This is the biggest Pikea I've ever seen.
Well, it's enlarged 12 times. That's 12 times bigger than the life-size one actually would be.
I guess that's right. The life-size ones would have been about 2 inches long, like this.
Yeah, not very big.
Evolutionary biologist Rudy Rath is obsessed with just these questions. As a leading authority on the Cambrian Explosion, he consults with those who seem to make extinct animals come back to life.
It would seem likely that there's not a single cause for a unique event like that, but we don't know. It was a unique event in Earth history. And there have been a number of hypotheses that have been put forward, and the hypotheses are good ones, and they include a real diversity of ideas. For example, that there was a genetic revolution that took place.
The genetic revolution of the Cambrian period could never have occurred without Earth's first primitive animals, the sponges. They had existed for millions of years, establishing the way cells interact to build an animal. Building on the cellular framework established by sponges, flower-like cnidarians were the first animals to develop the revolutionary ability to move. Finally, life began to evolve in dramatic new ways with the appearance of flatworm-like animals. This was the first creature to embody the genetic blueprint of a hunter, complete with a head and a primitive brain set near sensory organs. But reaching a critical threshold of genetic complexity was only part of what triggered the Cambrian explosion.
Another idea was that animals were evolving, they were small, but something changed ecologically. Perhaps the oxygen levels arose. And the result of that was that animals could become larger. A third possibility for why the Cambrian explosion happened is that it was an arms race, that some animals learned to become predators. They began to eat other animals. And as soon as that happened, of course, now the arms race begins, because there's an advantage to avoid being eaten, and there's an advantage to eating. So an arms race begins, an arms race that hasn't ended yet in the animal kingdom. This is still driving evolution even now. And I think it's likely, in fact, that all of these explanations probably reflect some part of that truth of what happened to make the Cambrian explosion.
What may be most astounding about the Cambrian explosion's fossil record is what we can see mirrored in it. Today, almost every creature on Earth can be traced back to the animals that left these imprints. Even though the species that appeared during the Cambrian explosion are extinct, some animals today bear an uncanny resemblance to them. This was Achaea, a carnivorous worm that first appeared over 500 million years ago. It's almost a double for the modern-day velvet worm, a predatory animal found in damp leaf litter and moist undergrowth of the Australian forests. Of course, nothing remotely resembling an elephant existed 500 million years ago. But the basic blueprints for these magnificent creatures were also being sketched back then. The elephant's basic design, its muscle segments, skeleton, brain and spinal cord were represented in the tiny Pikaia. It's hard to imagine a creature any more different from an elephant. Pikaia swam the oceans and measured only a few inches. But this ancient body plan would be passed down to fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. Even elephants would descend from this ancient design.
One of the amazing things about the animal kingdom, right from the Cambrian on, is that there's only about 35 body plans, basic designs. Yet there are millions of species today, millions of species at any slice of time in the past. And they represent everything from insects to whales, animals that live in water, animals that burrow underground, animals that live in coral reefs, animals that swim in the ocean, animals that live on the Antarctic ice. All of these species, based on these 35 body plans.
It was as if nature somehow struck upon life's essential designs in a single evolutionary leap. Every new shape of life that followed has been a variation on one of these themes.